Here's something that might surprise you. The first Christian martyr wasn't killed for preaching in temples or leading mass conversions. He was targeted for helping distribute food to widows and speaking uncomfortable truths to people in power.
That's such a fascinating angle on Stephen's story. How someone handling what we'd call social services today ended up changing the course of religious history.
Well, what really strikes me is how his role evolved. The early church leaders chose him because they needed someone trustworthy to handle this controversy about food distribution. Greek speaking widows were apparently being overlooked in the daily service.
So essentially, they were dealing with issues of cultural bias and resource allocation, problems that sound remarkably modern.
Exactly. And here's where it gets interesting. Stephen brought such wisdom and spirit to this administrative role that he started attracting attention. The historical accounts say he began performing signs and wonders among the people.
Hmm, that must have really ruffled some feathers among the religious establishment. I mean, here's this unofficial leader gaining influence outside their control.
Oh, you know it did. And when they couldn't beat him in public debates, they resorted to what we'd now call character assassination: false witnesses, trumped up charges, the whole 9 yards.
That reminds me of how whistleblowers often face similar tactics today. When you can't dispute the message, attack the messenger, right?
Exactly. And here's where Stephen shows incredible courage. Instead of defending himself against these charges, he uses his trial to deliver this masterful analysis of Jewish history, building to a devastating conclusion about their rejection of prophets and messengers.
Well, that certainly wasn't the defensive strategy his lawyers would have recommended, if he had any.
You know what's fascinating? The text describes his face looking like the face of an angel during this speech. There are actually similar accounts throughout history of people's faces becoming radiant in moments of intense spiritual experience.
Speaking of historical parallels, this reminds me of accounts from the civil rights movement. People maintaining supernatural calm and dignity even while facing violence.
That's such an insightful connection, and it leads to what I think is the most powerful moment in the story. As they're literally stoning him to death, Stephen asks God not to hold this sin against them. He's following Jesus' example of loving his enemies in the most extreme circumstances imaginable.
And among those approving his execution was Saul, later known as Paul, who would go on to write much of the New Testament. Talk about unexpected consequences.
Right? It makes you wonder how witnessing Stephen's death influenced Paul's later transformation. Here was someone who demonstrated exactly the kind of courage and conviction Paul would later become known for.
So, what do you think this story tells us about creating lasting change in society?
Well, I think it challenges our modern metrics of success. Stephen's ministry lasted maybe a few months at most, but his impact has echoed through centuries. It suggests that faithfulness matters more than fame or immediate results.
That's quite countercultural in our age of viral moments and instant metrics.
And you know what else stands out? How the most significant movements often start with meeting practical needs. Stephen didn't set out to be a martyr. He started by making sure hungry people got fed.
That's really the heart of it, isn't it? The connection between serving others and speaking truth to power.
Exactly. And maybe that's the most relevant lesson for today: that lasting change often starts with simple acts of service, and that speaking truth requires both courage and love, not just one or the other.
Even when, or maybe especially when, it comes at a personal cost.
You know, in a world that often seems divided between pragmatists and idealists, Stephen's story suggests we don't have to choose. We can be practical in our service and uncompromising in our principles. That's what creates ripples that last beyond our own time.